All right, yes, that's pretty much what we'll be talking about today on My Doctor. So good morning, how are you? I hope you're well, wherever you're watching us from. Thank you very much for choosing My Doctor as your source for the most credible information as far as health is concerned. And of course, today we'll be focusing from the video, and that is on obesity, but with a different turn, and we'll be focusing on childhood obesity. And of course, this is a problem that is global, and it is steadily affecting many low and middle income countries, and of course, particularly in urban settings, and the prevalence is increasing at a very alarming rate. So why is that the case, and how does this even come about in the first place? Well, you want to stick around till the end of the show for that and much more on our discussion today, that is on childhood obesity. But if you have any other question in relation to the topic, then feel free to send us a text message on 40920, and we'll be more than glad to answer all your questions as far as obesity is concerned, but mostly measuring in children. So my guest is here today, so let's meet him. Good morning.
Good morning,
How are you doing today?
I'm very fine today.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you very much for making time for us. Looking sharp, as
you.
always.
Oh,
and just in case someone is tuning in for the very first time today, and of course want to know more about you, and introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Geoffrey Ngewa. Currently, I'm working with Medisport Health East Africa, and we are all over. We are on the online platform if you want to get in contact with us. We are based in Nairobi here, also in Ebru, and also in Thika. That's where our offices are. And we deal with health information. That's why today we are here. And I really find pleasure when we get to understand more about this. We also do a lot to do with medical supplies. We also do everything that entails improving the health of people.
All right.
Yes.
It's pretty much important
Very much.
to help as many people as we can as far as just health literacy is concerned, because health is wealth. Anyway.
Oh, yes.
So now, talking about obesity, I know we've talked about it on a global scale, but now let's just narrow down to Kenya. How serious is childhood obesity? I know when you talk about obesity, most of us tend to think about it in terms of the adults and mostly in women. But then again, we tend to forget a little bit about the men and the children. So how serious is childhood obesity in the country?
Childhood obesity in this country, it is there. We have a good percentage of childhood obesity currently, and the prevalence is very high in the urban centers, urban cities, the urban areas compared to the rural areas. So yes, it does affect children. So children are indeed affected, and as we are going into the show, I know we are going to see so much, but about prevalence, in Kenya, it has gone higher. We know, in comparison with other nations like Canada, US, yes, it is higher. It is quite higher compared to this country at this moment. But when you look at the rate, when you look at the curve, then it is increasing. Yes,
and
the rate is increasing.
Which is really, really worrying as compared to if, let's say it was on the rise and then plateaued. You see, that's a different case.
That
but
would be different.
It was never there before, but then again, we start seeing a steady increase, which should worry all of us, I would say.
Oh, yes.
And now, when we talk about obesity, especially in children, what exactly does that mean? Because you see, most of us tend to think that if a child is a little bit chubbier, then they're healthy. All right?
Yes.
So we want to understand, first of all, is chubby a bad thing, especially in children? And then again, does it translate to mean that they are obese? Now,
when a child is chubby, doesn't necessarily mean, but we normally have different percentage of what comprises you. We have the lean body mass, which has no fat, has no water. Then we also have the body water percentage. Then we also have now the fatty percentage. So actually the body water should take the 2/3 of the entire.
Of the entire body.
Yes.
All right.
Then the remaining part, that is now they are third. The 2/3 of it, sorry, a third of it should be the fat. Then the remaining, we have the lean body mass. So in all that, when there is difference in that scale, then you realize there is a problem with with the weight of the baby.
Yeah.
And then in the same note, we have it different, slightly different. We normally use the BMI, whatever, to get to know in the adults and every other. So when it comes to children, we use the growth charts.
Ah, all right. We don't do BMI and waist circumference for the children, or do we?
It comes in because they're basically modified BMI kind of, because we have the percentiles and all that, which we check in relation to the weight, the length, and then now the difference is also in the babies we use length, but in adults we use the height. Of which there is a difference of about 0.5. When when you're standing, you're compressing your joints and whatever. So actually, that's how there is so much of math calculations that are done in that. But then now, basically coming to now the basic aspect of it, the babies, when they are chubby, when you begin seeing those signs, it's good to always find out, have they gone beyond the standard? Or it's just at a good level, because they are different levels. We have you might be under, then it might be below, then it might be also the normal, and sometimes you are just overweight, and sometimes now above that you are obese. And sometimes we have now the critical aspect of it, again you're obese, but now the serious. So that is how it is. It's on a scale.
It's on a scale.
Oh, yes.
All right. And you talked about there's a standard where if someone or a child, of course, goes over, then that means they are either overweight and then going into obesity. So what is the standard? So that we know. So the next time, let's say a child, of course, in their growth and well-being, once they now, surpass the standard, then there's a problem. And we're able to pick it, early enough.
So when calculating the standards, always when you are below 18.5.
All right. That's the BMI.
Yes.
All right. For an adult, or?
It cuts somehow, they are not different.
All right.
They are not that different in as much as, yes, on the graph, there is a different way we calculate it on the charts, right?
Yeah.
Yes. When it comes to, I don't want to go so much into the percentiles and whatever, because now it can even take a half of our show.
Yeah.
But all in all,
so much,
somehow, the basic aspect of it, of which they are consumerate, so commensurate, I mean. So now they go together. Right. So and for that for that matter, now when it's 18.5 and below, you are underweight. Yeah, it's below.
Right.
Then between 18.5 way to 24.5, that's the normal.
That's the normal. All right.
Yes. Then from 24.5 way to 30. 29.5 there. About there, now that's you see, this one is the normal, then now that's the overweight aspect of it. Right. So above that 30.5, you are obese.
You're obese.
And then now, there is now the acute. You become the now critical levels of being obese now. So you see from 35 way to 40.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So that's basically what we have.
Okay. But is that determinant on a person's height, of course? Yeah.
Yes.
And what about age? Because I don't want to think about a child's weighing over 40, although there are those cases.
Yes.
All right. So, but then again, you also talked about a chart for the children. So yes, we talked about a BMI, which cuts across. All right. And like you said, it goes hand in hand. So can we talk about the charts, which, again, not going so much into the mathematics, but just the standard, so that people know that, let's say, once you take your child to probably their next appointment, if they are a little bit past, let's say, this particular mark, then you need to do something.
Yes. Normally, the study involves many, let me say, the standard of the pre-unit standard. So now when your child is born, of course, the weight, you have to, whatever is involved is the length, then the age also, and the length, the age and the weight. They all go hand in hand. And so, when it is beyond, because there is a way we also relate it, like I've just given the first aspect of the BMI, which is basically weight over height squared of yourself. So you see, like, now, when you bring it all together, it always, there is a standard. And so for that standard, mainly, when you have 6 kgs, maybe at birth and all that, then, you know, it has to be regular increase. It has to be a clean graph that rises. So sometimes you'll realize it goes way, the graph kind of turns, and then the increase of the weight goes higher.
Okay.
And you don't have to basically give a specific figure, because different babies are born differently.
True.
So now, because of that, when the baby is, you don't compare your baby with the neighbor's baby.
Absolutely.
Because also your diet and whatever might be different. And for that matter, only observe the curve. The curve, once it's straight, then it's always good that it is somehow straight. It increases in that order. But then when there is abnormality on drawing the curve, then you will realize there is something that needs to be done. You need either to begin cutting down the fats or yes, and get to know what to do.
Okay, now before we talk about diet, which I really appreciate the fact that you brought up that point. Yeah, because I mean, children are different and the way they grow is also different. But then again, there's something about when a child grows, which I think it's best that we talk about it. I've had people say that sometimes, you see, as soon as a child is born, let's say, for instance, they were like 3 kg or 2.8 or sometimes 4.5. There's some people who, you know, some babies who are, you know, 4.5 or 4, but regardless of the weight, all right? So once they go home, let's say after the hospital, some of them tend to lose weight a little bit and then now start gaining it. And I like the factor that you said it should be steady, so that once you notice they've gained like quite a little bit of more weight than they should, then that means there's a problem. So are they gaining it in terms of 0.5 or 1 kg? Or because like for every, let's say at 1 month, let's say a child weighs this much, and then once, of course, they grow to 2 months to 3 months before, and then you start introducing, you know, either weaning them or giving them, you know, porridge and all that, and then, So in terms of their steady increase, what are we looking at? I know you talked about not putting a figure onto it, but is it normal?
I'm always very careful
about
when it
the
comes
figures.
to figures, because you might cause a whole mess.
Exactly.
Oh, yes.
And I totally understand that. So in terms of the steady increase, again, just the standard.
Okay, now,
so that we know.
Because you have demanded. Okay, so for that matter, you increase basically the average rate, because now we have the average rate. At least you add at least 2 kg, a kg or so within a month or something. As you see that kind of rate of increase, then it will be, it's such a steady.
That's on the normal.
You see it increase like that. But then again, it might be beyond, because also the length, the increase of the height and all that matters a lot. Yes. And also the growth rate, sometimes it differs.
It's different,
It's different. That's why when the child is growing faster, then definitely also the weight needs to increase. Because if now you put such a figure like now, then you know someone is strict on 1 kg. And they're like, okay, now added 2, added 3. They're like, okay, now this is exponential. They're like, so there is a big problem. So it doesn't really have to raise concern that much. But as far as weight is concerned, the moment you see, especially for these babies who look chubby, it's important to keep a very close eye. Yes, because actually it's not really good. It's dangerous for the health of children when they are obese at such level. There are adverse effects, complications that do arise. So it's important to always follow up, and that's the moment when you see the signs, then get in touch with someone like a medic or something who will be able to advise and help you, as you know, the calculation, as far as the calculation is done, and then you will also learn, and then now continue with the same.
Becomes easier.
It becomes
so that you can pick up as soon as they start adding that extra weight. Of course, it's easier to pick up. All right.
Because you'll know now the trend of your of your child.
Okay. So before we talk about the complications and the science as well, so someone might be like, then How does obesity then come about for children? Because, of course, we want to believe for the first 6 months they are on breast milk. And if they're not, of course, there's that alternative where they can be given none. All right? So for the first 6 months. And is genes... I mean, does it have a role in this? Because I know of some people who say, sisi kwetu si ni wakubwa tu. So once a child grows, of course, they might be small, but then again, somewhere along the way, they start gaining, again, too much weight. And people might not really see this as a cause of alarm, because si kwetu sisi wote ni wakubwa, so hata mtoto ni mkubwa, all right? So for obesity, so how does this come about? Does it come about after, let's say, 6 months of life, or sometimes it can even come before?
Now, obesity... in children, when you've mentioned something to do with genes, but before I come to genes, first of all, there is intake. And now the intake, because you've talked about the babies before they get to getting weaned, they're using the breast milk and all that. So that milk is determined by what the mother takes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You see, what the mother takes is what gets translated to that. And also, when you talk about the genetic makeup, it's kind of the frame that now determines the trend. So now, the genetic makeup also has influence on the body chemicals and whatever called the hormones and all that. So that status in the mother matters a lot. So also the fats, if fats are so many, then they will be passed also through
the child.
To the child. So it's a two-way, because the baby that time depends more on what the mother takes.
All right.
So the mother should eat healthy too, to determine the health of the baby. And on that note, it differs, because you see the body also has its own mechanisms of correction.
Correction, true.
Yeah, because now when the baby has before the 6 months, if you take if the baby is exposed to such kinds of nutrients that can lead to, because I don't want to talk about the nutrition aspect and all that, but meanwhile, as the baby takes and consumes this, the milk and all that, they will definitely, if the mother eats healthy, then the health of the baby will be good because of the contents of the milk.
Right.
Yes. Okay. But then now, when it comes to the weaning stage, now that's a different aspect again, because now that one externally, the influences and all that, and also how active the baby is, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. That really matters a lot, because babies should be active. And for one reason or another, your baby may not be active. Sure. And there comes now the idea of genetic factors. There are some conditions which are congenital, or which the baby is born with. Sometimes we have the Turner syndrome, yes, because the baby can get born with that, and other syndromes, of course, that accompany the same. Now, you see, the genetic factors influence the hormones very much.
Very much, yeah.
So, and then you see a baby can also have the urge to eat a lot.
I wanted to ask that. Does appetite also play a role in this? Yeah, because someone will be like, but my child eats a lot. And others will be like, but my child doesn't eat much. But you might find that this one who doesn't eat much is actually overweight as compared to this other one who eats a lot. Yeah. So is it more the appetite, metabolism, or what happens for that case?
Now, you see, what you eat, they are what we call the modifiable factors, and the non-modifiable factors in this. So there are those which can be modified, like the input from out. But then the non-modifiable, then that one needs another level, because now we have to now come in with other measures, so that now we control the body on how it. We classify the genetic aspect of it mostly under the non-modifiable factors, because now you see, if the hormones in the body, they are like, let me use for example of a hormone called leptin. So you see, like that one is mainly responsible for, it juggles around with the appetite. It controls the appetite. So you see, when that hormone now is it's in high amounts, because it's being released and again. So you see, it brings that effect. And then now, when it is suppressed again, there is an effect.
An effect as well. Okay.
Oh yes, so based on those, the hormonal factors, the genetic factors and all that, the non-modifiable factors.
Yeah.
If that is the case, then it's a different. But when now it's the modifiable factors, now about food, diet, lifestyle, whatever, the sedentary aspect of it. So that's different.
All right.
Yeah, and it cuts across even children sometimes. Nowadays, we have televisions in the house.
Exactly.
And then the baby spends hours there.
Yeah.
Like those are now the babies who are at the pre-unit
before
level.
you go to school and all that.
Oh, yes.
All right. Okay. Now, and so appetite's one of that, one of that, and metabolism and all that.
Yes.
Okay. What about, because most of us tend to think if you give a child, junk.
Junk.
Yes.
Oh,
yes. More often, then they will get they'll get to that point where, of course, they get obese. So can we talk about, first of all, diet and what role it plays? Because again, this child, of course, they are growing, and the formation of or strengthening of their body parts, and and just the whole growth of a child, of course, is solely dependent on the diet.
The diet,
right? I know of some children who some parents have introduced like no sugar diet into a child's life, and then they grow up knowing, well, you don't really need sugar. But for most of us, I mean, it's really, really hard to cut down on sugar. We're really trying, but it's very difficult. But so in terms of introducing sugar and just junk in general, to a child's, to a child's diet or to a child's life. How does that, of course, end up either causing cases of overweight and obese at the moment, or let's say later in life?
Now, there is a point of consideration.
Right.
How come in these other nations out there, Canada, in the US, out country, the standard and the level is different of obesity with this country here, in this country. I've begun from that level so that you now look at it. The type of food that is mostly consumed on the other side, that one now speaks of it. The processed foods and whatever, the pizza, nowadays babies are talking about pizza.
All the time,
chips and all that, the junks you've talked about. The diet has a very big role on this. And what also you cook for your children at home, whatever you prepare for them to eat, Weetabix and blah, 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 everyone is talking about. But then looking at, let me bring this, it sounds quite interesting, getting to the rural aspect. Look at the rural aspect. Then the kinds of food that these children eat. Some of them use wimbi, the sorghum, whatever. And then they're prepared for, and they eat cassava. Those are the types of food and whatever. So you see, then comparing with this, the fatty aspect of it also. There is the natural fats, there are different types. And then there is this, the processed. So the effect comes in based on that type of diet. And so now, coming to that level.
What can we get to that after a very short break? Because time really flies by. But yes, I like that aspect of the urban versus the rural and what they eat. And they're also active. Because I remember growing up, we used to be outdoors all the time. And by the time you come back in the evening, you look like something else and the kind of beating you will get. But that helped. That helps. So I think we'll focus also on that as well. So if you have any other question in relation to today's topic, and that is on childhood obesity, feel free to send us a text message on 40920, and we'll be more than glad to answer all your questions. So let's take that very short break. We'll see you right after. All right, welcome back. Glad you're still with us. Now we are focusing on childhood obesity, and like we said, this is actually on a rising trend, especially in the country, and we really want to understand why, because there's so many myths surrounding obesity. Other people think, oh well, this is just in my family and there's nothing much we can do, and others think, oh well, it's very, very difficult to, or we think that when a child is more chubbier, we're not talking about on the healthier side, then we think they are healthy. So all these myths surrounding childhood obesity is what we're focusing on today. So if you have any other question in relation to the same, send us a text message on 40920, and we'll be more than glad to answer all your questions. Now, Geoffrey, before we went for break, there's that aspect of diet and of course, comparing, the urban setting as compared to the rural setting, which we said from, when we started the show, that this is more, prevalent in urban settings. Children are not getting enough play. And then again, there's that aspect of just sedentary, lifestyle and diet as well, where we all think that, feeding our kids or treating them for the weekends, others probably tend to do this more often than it should, of course, has an effect on them. Right. So what do we give them? I mean, how much of play? Because people might argue and say, but see, they play at school and they play, let's say, in church and all that. Isn't that enough to help, of course, fight cases of obesity in children?
The lifestyle of a baby itself should be regulated and controlled by the parent, so that it is determined, especially in such a generation where many people are exposed to, there is also internet, the social media aspect of it. We have very small babies nowadays who come even to hospital with the conditions like diabetes, hypertension. So these are cases which we have been considering, cases of the old. But then now you see it is crossing. Oh yes. And so for that matter, you may not say, it's enough how the baby has played in school. Okay, you are not there with the baby and whatever. Yes, if they played, but it should be something that comes naturally. So it should be also controlled by the parent. And for that matter, also the diet that you introduce to them, as we have just said, because when you talk about obesity, it's basically the increase of the load of fats in the body. So when the load of fats increases and you see they are not getting depleted, they are not getting exploited, then they become dangerous to the to the body of the baby. So they are supposed to be controlled.
And when you talk about obesity, of course, most of us also tend to think that this is a rich people's problem. The rich kids, they take exactly junk, all the time. And again, this is a myth, because there's also an aspect of hunger and obesity. So just take us through how these two come together, because when you think about it, like if you don't think about it carefully, you might think they go like they're far apart. There's that aspect of hunger and obesity, they do not come hand in hand, but there's a relationship. All right, so what brings about, because I mean these children are starving, so obesity, how does it come about?
That's an anomalous situation, phenomenon. That now you see, for that on the first aspect, basically eating is what leads to the increase of fat, the loading of fats. But then at the same time, the body also, it has its ways of synthesizing fats at the same point. And so, and on the same way, all these things are revolving around the mechanisms of the body, the metabolism, which is controlled by the genetic factors right from birth, and then the hormonal aspect of it. So you realize that depending on your situation, like now for people who, like if a baby also, there are hormones which have been suppressed, you see. Like for example, let me combine the sleeping aspect together with this aspect of hunger. You see, someone can stay hungry, can stay hungry, but also the same hunger is used by many people to try to cut down the fats. You see, someone is trying, like when they realize they are going overboard, so they try to cut it down through hunger, yet it's increasing, you see. There is no match.
That is what we don't understand. So how?
So you see, so this is what usually happens. The body's mechanisms are controlled by these systems that have been put in place, the hormonal aspects and the genetic aspects. So it's not limited to the food, the eating. And for that matter, you are supposed to, when you realize now that is going overboard for your case, that now the fats are not getting depleted or whatever. So now this is what you do. There are statins and whatever. There are the therapeutic measures that can be incorporated, because now at all costs the fat deposits have to be exploited, have to be broken down. Yes, and so it usually happens that the hormones, depending on the activity. Let me use, I've just mentioned one very common hormone in this, and also, okay, before I come to the next aspect, you see, that hormone of leptin, when you sleep, when you sleep, it usually regulates the appetite, whatever. So the appetite for eating when you sleep. So you see now it becomes when you sleep, it when it's released into the system, it suppresses. You understand? The suppresses the need to eat.
Yeah.
But then now, when you fail to, because of some other aspects that might lead to that, maybe stress and whatever, because these are things which are, these are intertwined situations. So now, when it is into the system so much, usually, you see, when your leptin has been denied, then you have the urge to eat, the urge to eat. And then in the same way also, there are hormones which are behind, which are responsible for the metabolic processes that also break these things down. Even when you are in situ, you understand. So that is usually what basically happens in the body. And then now there is failure of the complete metabolic processes, that cycle from being realized. Oh, yes.
So most of the time when you think about hunger and obesity, we think, okay, fine. So when there is lack of proper diet or proper nutrition, of course, most people tend to really focus on one thing, and that is more on carbohydrates. So I think most of the time we tend to think, oh, so the fact that they eat a lot of starch, then of course you might end up getting obese. Is that true? Is there any relation to that?
Okay. So eating starch has an impact. Oh yes, it's true. But not limited to.
Not limited to.
Yes. Because sometimes, as we have said, there are other factors which you may not be able to modify and control.
Yeah, true.
Yes, just as we've said. But so it's not really limited to. Sometimes we might have the fast which is controlled. Yeah, we might also recommend that, you know, then we introduce proteins. Yes, many a times. So that is the phenomenon.
All right, but I think then this goes to especially those organizations that offer relief foods to not only focus on the starch, but also look a little bit on the protein. So
look at the proteins
so
also.
you give them, again, a balanced diet. Okay, now, so then how do I know my child is obese? Because like we said when we started, they show that aspect of, well, they're chubby, nothing much we can do, that runs in the family, we're okay, we're cool. But then again, this child, of course, will have complications from, of course, the fact that this is ignored, and the more it's ignored, of course, the higher the chances of getting to overweight, obese, and then get to that aspect of acute obesity. So then, what tells me that my child is obese? How do I know? Are there maybe things that we need to look for?
Yes. So apart from the aspect of the chubby, sometimes someone might develop sleeping apnea. That is when someone sleeps and then in Swahili they say mtu anangorota. So you see that sound, the snoring aspect of it, because of the fats, the fat increase, the weight, then the load of fats in the body. Sometimes also there is getting tired. The baby always gets tired every time. And sometimes also, because you see the weight has increased, they might also, there are other complications that come all along that you might be able to see. But you see now, it depends at what level, but many a times it begins with the size. Then looking at the tummy, because now the stomach always is the one which harbors the maximum, the larger percentage of fats. And then now coming to other bodies, because you see the other parts of the bodies rather, the body rather. Now you see if it's larger than usually, because the standards, there is a way they need to go hand in hand, you see, when the measurements are taken, the neck and the triceps and whatever. And so when it's beyond, then there is something to check on that. So how do you know that your baby has that? When you've seen, first of all, the increase, and then you say, okay, they are chubby. Be happy, at least they're not on the other side. But malnutrition, malnutrition is not really lack. It can be
also be excess of.
For that matter. And then there are also other aspects, like you see snoring, because you see sometimes the nasal passages are blocked. Yes, that's mainly. And then you see sleeping also. Sometimes you might also have the sleepiness when they are too sleepy during the day and whatever, in the abnormal patterns. Yes, then you see it comes in, because the whole aspect has a whole imbalance. It has an influence in the balancing of the systems of the body.
All right.
Oh yes.
Okay, and so can we quickly go to now, fine, so diagnosis. So I
Diagnosis.
noticed all those things that you've said, of course, increase in size, they're tired, they cannot, sleep well, there's that aspect of snoring and all that. So when I take them to a hospital, then what happens? What are some of the tests that you take to ascertain that, oh, well, maybe they are overweight and you can manage that, or they are obese, or they're getting to that part where it's getting to being an acute obesity?
Oh, yes. Now, at that point, the first thing, even as I began, I mentioned the aspect of the use of the growth scales. So now, the growth chart on the babies, we use that, and it also involves the use of tape measures. Of course, sometimes we use the calipers. Yeah. So we involve all this. Then there is the hydraulic, the hydrous aspect of it. We involve that also to measure the body, the amount of water in the body. And then you see, as I said, they are all divided into percentages, you see. So then, as I described it in terms of fractions. And so then when there is a higher level of fats, you see, out of that, that's an aspect in which we will get to know, oh, so this baby of yours is obese. And then you see, yeah, also sometimes when we measure the fats, because when you take the, like, for example, you take the measurements of the diameter and the whatever, no, the circumference. So you see, you will also realize there is a part which is having fats more. You identify exactly where they are, because there is a way, the proportion in which it needs
the fat, it might be sort of accumulated in one part of the body as compared to.
Oh yes, sometimes they also appear with stretch marks because of that. There are many things that come because you see, now they have a whole impact, yes, to the skin appearance. Sometimes the pale aspect of it and all that. Yes.
All right, so now what happens then in terms of, is that treatment first of all for it, or you just identify the cause and then sort of deal with the cause? I mean, what usually happens to just help this child? Because like we said, we cannot let them be, because it affects them in one way, or not even in one way or the other, in so many ways.
Yes.
Yeah. So what happens then?
So there are levels of treatment.
All right.
And of course now, the first thing, basically this obesity aspect is managed with the lifestyle aspects of it. So the first thing, especially as soon as you realize that your baby is obese, or the fats are accumulating, or just overweight, the first thing is to put measures to break down the fats. That's through the exercise. And then through the exercise, the physical exercise, then the active, how you involve the child actively, because, and then you withdraw those aspects of, those inhibiting aspects to this, to being active. Then secondly, that is basically for the modifiable, and also the diet aspect of it in the modifiable factors. You see, then you see there is the diets. You need to modify so that you change the diet, involve a lot of fruits and whatever. Fruits are healthy. The natural food is better. Then these other processed, try to withdraw. Now from that level, it depends. Depending with also the level at the, if at all they are underweight, or they are at the normal, or now they are at the just overweight. It's simply overweight. At the overweight level, then you can apply these measures that I've just talked about. Then when they are obese, also these ones are involved. But it reaches a point when they bring a whole change to the body operation. The operation of the body. So for that, at that level, you have to introduce some. You have to introduce the therapeutic measures. There are some drugs, and also before there are some drugs like statins. You see, those are the ones which, like atorvastatin, you administer, then you see they break down the fat deposits, because you cannot do it physically, and also you need to also regulate the hormonal release. If at all the problem is with the hormones, then you have to regulate and get to know what to balance at what time. Sometimes, if at all there are the complications that have come, because coming along even the conditions to do with the cardiovascular conditions.
Yeah.
You see, I'm talking about the whole the metabolic syndrome. So the metabolic syndrome, including the diabetes mellitus, you see, the hyperlipidemia, high levels of lipids in the body, the sugar intake, whatever the diabetes aspect of it, hypertension, the blood pressure has changed. So what you do, you deal with that, because now at that level of the overweight, you have to begin administering anti-clotting factors.
Oh yeah,
because now
they might get actually cases of clotting.
Yes, because of the increase of the level of fats in the body, then you have to introduce those ones, because now the heparin, whatever, so that now and that one mainly we use aspirin and others. You see, so it's good to introduce that so that it breaks down. It tries to prevent such adverse effects. So you treat the complication, you address the symptom that you have seen, and then now the management aspect, but you do not withdraw.
Yeah.
There.
Because I was about to ask. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, most people will, of course, that's the first thing that comes to mind. That is the withdrawal. And you see, this is something that the body is sort of used to, and then all of a sudden you cut the supply.
Oh, yes.
All right. So what happens to the body then? You know, if that is the approach that one decides to take.
When you decide to use that, please, if you have trained the body, somehow the body is a type that adapts to conditions. Like you see, basically in this country, how we are, it's because of the conditions, environmental. Then you see, when you go to another place, you see many people, even the skin color changes and whatever. So because of that, you can do the regulation bit by bit with time. You reduce, you begin as you had been induced. Now begin withdrawing poly. You see, so then in that process, the body will get to adapt. But you don't just initiate sudden changes. You might cause yourself harm. Somehow it won't really work. You won't get the results that you expected. And also the aspect of the physical exercise, that's a constant factor.
Yeah.
So you see,
it's just once, twice, and then that's
and the diet, because you know, someone might say, okay, now daktari alisema we can use these drugs that break down the fat deposit.
So we skip the exercise part.
We enjoy the pizza and we take the drugs. So that's not the situation. Oh yes,
you're not helping. Okay, so and what about those cases of where someone has gotten to that point where they have acute obesity. And of course, also this one I want to believe comes with a whole lot of risks and, you know, complications, you know, just accompanying them. So in terms of the treatment and just helping this child to just come back to the normal recommended weight for their age, is there like, is the treatment a little bit more comprehensive and more intentional as far as dealing with acute obesity?
Oh yes, it is. Because now at that level, the symptoms are different. They have graduated to another level. And for that matter, sometimes of which we have the BMI mostly 34 and above at that level. So, and the symptoms also are more pronounced. So you'll see this child is very tired every time. The sweating, you see, and other things that sometimes even they have these other complications that have come. Deal with those complications first.
Okay.
Then sometimes it's so acute that we have to do surgery. Yeah, because when the fats are too much, then we have to surgically remove the fats. So that's why you would rather deal with it while you're still overweight. But then now, if it happens that now you are obese, so for that matter, sometimes we recommend for surgery, because like for the case of apnea, you see someone might collapse one time because that is the point at which we depend, you see, the oxygen supply. So we have to remove the extra fats at the nasal area and whatever the passage, so that now it's reduced. And also sometimes we have the liver, fatty liver. So you see, it also has the effect. Those are the complications that are usually common at that level with acute obesity. So the liver, you have to get to know. The kidneys also, because you'll find those people with kidney problems. Sometimes even the type of, you know, the stool that is produced, you see, it is different. There's usually a whole difference with these people. So now you begin with managing that condition that has come up, then treat it. Yes, and then now get to what is it that led to this. That is usually a very basic concept in medication. Oh yes.
Treat the cause.
Treat the cause, then address what. Handle the symptoms, address the symptoms, and then get to treat the cause.
Okay, and then fine. So someone, and that is for the acute case of obesity. Now, can we talk about aftercare? Because we might easily forget from what you said. Sometimes people might try to sort of opt to use the shortcut, and that is, see, there are drugs that can break down the fat. So we use that. We use drugs that can break down the fat, but continue with the lifestyle that we're used to, which again does not help. But then again, so after treatment, so then what happens in terms of averting cases of one going back to square one where they were, and that is a child being obese. So after treatment, what happens in terms of, are there changes they need to make as far as lifestyle is concerned? If they're on medication, adherence to medication, or what usually happens after, so that we do not go back to the an aspect of now they're being obese again. What do we do?
So when it comes to that aspect, after now you see you're beginning to
getting back to the normal weight.
You know, lifestyle is all about many a time self-discipline, changing of all that, because you need to now adapt, because it has the adverse effects. If you go back to the former way, former lifestyle, definitely you'll get back to the former. So the first thing you need to do, exercise. A lot of it. It's very healthy for your body. Definitely, it also it's all, you know, many people have seen, you know, it depends with what really you want, or whatever the resources that are near you. You can opt for running around, you know, the athletic aspect of it. You can decide, you can have gyms around, right? That you can be visiting.
You can go to, but children need to go to the gym. Really?
Oh no, for the children.
We're focusing on the children.
Okay, for the children today now. So when you talk about children, it's good to create an environment that they can do the playing. You see, like give them, because it's automatic. When they have the resources around, they will always use them to, you know, they will grow. So, and then children, please sometimes regulate the amount of times they spend on TV.
True.
Very important. Then don't introduce to them this social media, or if you introduce them, then regulate, because that is something that really takes someone away. Sometimes it's games all the time. It does the exercise of the mind, but physically it has the adverse effects. So what the baby should do, or what you should do with your baby, ensure they're always active. Follow up. Then whatever they eat, these candies, you know, they have effects. Avoid such. Then also avoid the junk foods, the fatty, whatever. So it's important to introduce to them a healthy living lifestyle. And also the food, consider their diet. Very, very important. Give them fruits. Yes, give them, and also sometimes you see these sweet drinks. They might also lead to the same, because they are fats. You know, excess sugars goes in.
And then
translates into fats. Oh yes.
All right. And what about the cases of genetics? You see, that is on the non-modifiable factor. Yes, so yes, avert some of the things that, of course, you've talked about. Watch on the diet, make sure they are active. Watch, again, on what they take. All right, and of course that again translates to that. But what about the aspect of genetics? You see, there's nothing much we can do about it, but there are things that we can do to sort of manage, and that is, you talked about the hormones in the body. So what do we do for a case of genetics?
For the case of genetics, you have to now inculcate the therapeutic measures now. You see now the drugs, we can use drugs. So it's important that now you get in touch with a physician. It's very important, because now they'll be able to assist, because obesity at all costs, you have to cut down the fats. Yes, you just have to cut them down. And so also the healthy eating aspect of it, don't ignore. Yes, it may not really have that great impact, but somehow it will sustain. It will help the other systems of the body. But then, because that is the cause, then it has to be dealt with, because basically what usually happens, there is a part of the chromosome, some specific part which lacks. For example, in Turner syndrome, you see. Now there's a specific chromosome that is not normal. So you may do the least to change it at that point. So it's important to introduce the drugs that break it down. Yes, I said, and also if there are complications that have come along, then those complications have to be dealt with. Yes, so just deal with them, especially now when it comes to sometimes we even introduce the hormones, in as much as it's not so much advisable, because it's not really advisable. We might try to introduce the synthetic, but you see, it will bring effects, positive, according to what you want, but there are also side effects well that also accompany. So you need to be very much aware of that. But there is a way it can be handled with just drugs. Yes, breaking down of fats is the basic, what we really want to achieve.
All right. So remember the way we always say prevention is key, and we really try to focus on the preventive aspect, and that is one type of medicine. Just medicine in general, and that is on the preventive type as compared to the curative type. So for those who probably are not obese yet and want to understand just ways that we can do to just prevent cases of obesity in children and in adults in general, what would you say? And I'll take that as your parting shot.
Okay. So when you prevent, it is really better, because it depends really, because if at all it's a psychological thing, like sometimes we have bulimia that I didn't mention, that's an overeating disorder. If you have that, then it's because of the psychological. So if at all that is the case, please try to avoid indeed stress it brings. You might overeat, and then so prevent, it's very important. Then basically look at your lifestyles. Avoid fats, a lot of fats, excessive fats. Avoid junk foods. Avoid excessive sugar. Yes, avoid. Do enough exercise daily, every day. Yeah. So then for children also, observe their diet. What is it that you're giving your child? Don't introduce drugs when it's not important at that point. Yes, just ensure that they are active, whatever. Give to them what is important for them. Keep them off the screen and whatever. So it's very important that you look at the physical activity. It helps a lot. In fact, it helps also the other body systems for that matter. And so summary, healthy living is what prevents getting obese. Oh yes.
All right, Jeffrey, thank you very much for coming by today. We really, really, really appreciate your time, because just helping us understand more on obesity. You brought up very, very interesting points that sometimes we tend to overlook as a general society, but we're glad that you were here today, of course, to just help us understand more on childhood obesity. And of course, also thank you very much for staying with us till the end of the show. I believe that you have learned a lot as far as childhood obesity is concerned. So do what you can to ensure that your child does not get to that point where they are overweight and then translating into obese and acute obesity, which is not good, because of course has a lot of complications associated with this same. So we have to end it here. My name is Winnie Lubembe. Thank you very much for staying with us on behalf of an amazing, amazing team behind us who made the show a success. We wish you a lovely day ahead. We'll see you next time on another episode of My Doctor. Stay safe and stay healthy. Goodbye.